What's good, nerds? How y'all doing? It is I, your boy Jay, the movie monk, the abbot of Arrow, the bishop of Bull Moose, the Criterion choir boy, the vicar of Vinegar Syndrome. Thanks for joining the Movie Mass. Thanks for clicking the buttons. And I want to acknowledge that it has been a minute, and I missed you guys. I hope you guys didn't miss me too much. I hope you missed me a little bit. You have to miss me a little bit. You can't be glad I was gone. I was very sick for several days. I was under the weather. I had no voice. Even when I felt a little bit better, my voice was kaput. I don't think anybody would have wanted to listen to me yap for 15 or 20 minutes in the condition my voice was in. And I was getting my ass kicked by my internship. I had work up to here. I got to do professional things. YouTube ain't paying the bills just yet.
Want to have sex on a pile of Blu-ray money?
But I want to welcome you guys to this fine episode of Movie Mass. I appreciate you for joining me. I'm actually here to talk about old Warner Brothers. And by now, you've probably all seen a dozen YouTube videos like this one that talk about the news surrounding Warner Brothers entering into an agreement to sell their whole ass to Netflix. And, you know, I really don't want to repeat what you may have already seen. I'm going to try to provide you some value for your time spent watching this video by not repeating the things that you've seen in other videos by some of my illustrious contemporaries, such as Chase from Maybe Pop Culture. You may have seen his video, and if you have, then you already know everything that he had to say, and I'm not doing you or me any good by repeating him. So I'm not here to talk about how bad the potential merger between Warner Brothers and Netflix is. I mean, it probably is pretty bad, and we're probably pretty fucked for WB releases in the future. Probably not going to be a whole lot of Warner Brothers physical media in the 2030s if this whole deal goes forward. We're even looking at maybe a post-apocalyptic wasteland for Warner Brothers films on physical media. There might be a day where you pay $600 for a used copy of the Friends Blu-ray set or something like that because you know Netflix wants Friends back on the streaming service. I mean, that's money for them. I mean, they might be trying to buy Warner Brothers for Friends alone. But we'll basically be forced to pay scalper fees for, you know, some Blu-ray on eBay, maybe even DVD releases from back in the day, from the earlier decades of the 21st century. So there's definitely like a worst-case post-apocalyptic scenario. I'm dressed like Kenshiro from Fist of the North Star, or as he's better known in the West, Mad Max, because they totally ripped off Mad Max. I got the leather jacket. I've cut the sleeves off. I got my super gay biker gloves on that I diddle the boys with, and then fight them for the Warner Brothers DVDs in the parking lot in front of the Bull Moose. Every time the Warner Brothers DVDs drop, I'm definitely imagining scenarios in my brain that are pretty disgusting, in all honesty. And you know, we can probably forget, I mean, I think Chase is right, we could probably forget about any Warner Brother film older than 1992 being available to stream. It's just not something that Netflix seems to be interested in, is older films. So those Warner Brothers films from like before 9/11 may just be too old for Netflix to really be very interested in, and that would be a shame as well, because obviously I'm a big fan, as I've made clear on this channel, I'm a big fan of the older films, classic Hollywood stuff, and there is some really great, you know, Warner Brothers 1930s, classic Hollywood, some comedies, and some gangster films that I would really hate to lose, but you know, what can you do?
What are you gonna do, huh?
So here's what I'm really here to talk about. I found myself in the wake of this whole announcement wondering, why the fuck is Warner Brothers so damned dead set on selling their ass? In an ideal world, wouldn't Warner Brothers be an independently salient business entity without needing some sugar daddy to swoop in and take care of them? Warner Brothers was one of the major studios. They've got 100 years of studio history under their belt. They've got phenomenal IP. I'll mention that again in a second. They've got some of the most valuable IP in the entire world. How are these people not making it? And if Warner Brothers can't make it, what hope is there for anybody else? Because like I said, Warner Brothers has some of the strongest IP. I mean, you know, you could make a case for certainly Disney's IP is certainly way up there. They might be the only ones that really could rival Warner Brothers, but I'll get into that. I started looking into the history of Warner Brothers and some of these other studios that are involved. I mean, back in the 1930s, so we're not going back a full 100 years to the silent film era or the very origins of Warner Brothers, but in the early days, you know, 1930s, Warner Brothers was a 10-ish year old company, and they were one of the big five. They were one of the big five. When I say big five, I mean the majors. There were 5 studios in the golden era of Hollywood that were considered the major studios. These were the big 5. There were also a couple of little studios. They were the little 3, the minors, but they used baseball references, right? They got the majors and the minors, right? Like Major League, Minor League. And Warner Brothers was absolutely one of the majors. I mean, they were a dynasty. The other 4 majors, of course, you've got Warner Brothers is one, but then the other 4 were RKO Radio Pictures, Paramount, 20th Century Fox, and MGM. Those were your 5 majors back then, roughly 90 or so years ago. And where are these motherfuckers now? Right? I just said RKO Radio Pictures. When's the last time you saw a Blu-ray loving motherfucker on YouTube say the words RKO Radio Pictures, talking about major studios from the 1930s? I dare say I might be the first ever, all time. Now, RKO, as I've mentioned, they're long gone. Adios. Nobody's heard of RKO, right? I mean, maybe you've heard of them. Maybe, like you saw the little intro when you popped in Citizen Kane, because you got Citizen Kane on 4K from Criterion, right? You've watched the shit, right? You didn't just buy it to have it on your shelf to feel cultured and not actually watch it because you're not actually interested in it, right? Right? I know you, okay? And I know that you're an aficionado of old cinema, and I know that you're well-versed in old cinema. So maybe you've seen the RKO logo when you were watching things like Citizen Kane. Of course, I mean, RKO gave us Citizen Kane. Everybody's heard of Citizen Kane. I don't know that everyone's seen it. Everyone should see it. If you consider yourself a film lover and you haven't seen Citizen Kane, are you really, though? Like, can you be a learned man of film and cinema if you haven't seen? You don't have to, it doesn't have to be your favorite movie in the world, but can you be a learned man of cinema if you've just never seen it? You're completely unaware. RKO also gave us some other big ones. Notorious, that's the Hitchcock film starring Ingrid Bergman and Cary Grant, my mans. I love that one so much. Notorious is great. I like Notorious better than I like Citizen Kane. I mean, Citizen Kane is the more renowned film. It may be the greater accomplishment artistically, but how do you argue with Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman and Alfred Hitchcock? You don't. They also gave us I Walked with a Zombie. Criterion recently released that one on Blu-ray and 4K in their Val Lewton double feature. So, you know, there's a lot of recognizable films that even people today, 90 years later, we would recognize having come from RKO Radio Pictures. So they gave us It's a Wonderful Life, for Christ's sake. That's an RKO. RKO, additionally, I want to mention this, they distributed Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon in 1951, right? We're not talking about some Johnny-come-latelys deciding Akira Kurosawa was pretty cool in 1999 and then putting all his movies out on DVD, Blu-ray, and 4K in the 2000s and 2010s. We're talking about a company that recognized the greatness of a Japanese film not 10 years after we went to war with the motherfuckers, and they brought this thing over and distributed it in the United States. They recognized how important Rashomon was as a cinematic work. They deserve credit for that. I mean, that's like a 30-plus year jump on Criterion for bringing over this foreign cinema and presenting it to audiences here in the United States. And let me tell you, in the 1950s, early 1950s, we was some jingoistic motherfuckers. We was not clamoring for Chinese films or Japanese films or any shit like that. You know, we have Roy Rogers in them. We didn't need that bullshit. I'm watching a Western, motherfucker. I don't want to watch some shit in Japanese and read subtitles. Psh, I'm a barely literate alcoholic. I work as an auto mechanic. I dropped out of the 8th grade if I was alive in 1951. Now, RKO got screwed over pretty hard when Howard Hughes bought that company. He bought them out and he took them over and he kind of ran them into the ground, more or less, is what you'll see most of the people who talked about it, the contemporaries who were around then, pretty much say Howard Hughes kind of ran him into the ground. Unfortunately, he sort of mismanaged them. He went very conservative with releases. He mismanaged them, and then they got bought and sold a few times over the decades. But obviously, RKO has essentially been functionally defunct since the mid to late 1950s. So they're gone. They were the first major to just go tits up and go bye-bye. They didn't really last much more than about 25 or so years, unfortunately. Now, MGM, also one of the big five. Everybody recognizes, even my 3-year-old recognizes the lion. The MGM lion. He does the growl at the beginning of the James Bond movies. Hell yeah, you know what I'm saying? Although MGM has been acquired by Amazon, as you probably know already. Amazon surely did that so they could control some of the IP that's under the MGM banner, like 007. The Prime service obviously has all the James Bond movies now. That's cool. So MGM just kind of exists on paper. They're not really making any productions. They're not making any decisions. That's all. Amazon is pulling the strings. They're making the decisions, and they're calling the shots. So, MGM, I guess, exists as an entity, a little bit more so than RKO, but it's not really. It's Amazon now. So you talk about MGM, and it's like, it's Amazon. 20th Century Fox, kind of same deal. They had the same fate. Of course, in the early 2000s, they started dropping the 20th century bit because we weren't in the 20th century anymore. And they just started calling themselves Fox Studios, et cetera. But in the beginning, in the golden era, they were in the golden era known as 20th Century Fox. And so they got bought up by Disney. That's a pretty dismal picture. I mean, that's probably almost as bad as Netflix buying up WB, except every now and again, we still, on occasion, get some Fox physical media. Not a lot, not enough, not as much as we'd like, but every now and again, you'll see some catalog release that Sony and Disney will put out together on some limited steelbook. And you take what you can get and you say thank you. You get what you get and you don't get upset, as my 6-year-old says. Nowadays, you gotta suck a mouse dick, give away your firstborn, and do some kind of Indian rain dance just to get a Fox 4K. And every now and again, the mouse will bless you. Here's your Fox 4K. Now, fuck off for another year and a half. So 3 out of the 5 golden age Hollywood major studios are essentially gone. Maybe still alive in some distant memory, still alive in some old film from the 30s or the 40s in the little intro reel, maybe, but they're gone. For all intents and purposes, they're gone. Paramount isn't in such great shape either. They merged with Skydance Media earlier in 2025, about mid-year. They merged with Skydance Media, but of course, anytime these mergers happen, it seems to come with a fuck ton of debt. So they were saddled with debt as a result of that merger. It's not always clear where the debt originates. It's not clear if the debt comes from the other company or both companies just bring a little bit of their debt. They're like two broke people getting married, like she brings a bunch of debt and he brings, like, she's got 100K in student debt, he's got 100K in student debt, and they get married and now they got 200K in student debt. I don't know if it's something like that or if there's some borrowing going on in order to make the acquisition. So the acquiring entity has to borrow money or something like that. But at any rate, Paramount got debt up to their tits, maybe even past their tits. And that weighs them down a little bit, despite Paramount actually being in kind of good shape, relatively speaking, given the age that we live in. They're in relatively good shape in 2025. But they've got over $13 billion in debt. That's a big what the fuck from me, dog. The Mission Impossible series was one of the big IPs for Paramount. And of course, that franchise is done now. It's over. They had Top Gun Maverick a few years ago, but even Top Gun Maverick, as successful as it was, it's a one-off. There's no indication of any kind of 6, 7, 8 film franchise like they'd love, with Harry Potter, with, to a lesser extent, the Hunger Games. You've got these franchises where even once the books are done, they still manage to keep pumping out movies. They keep pumping out product because people are buying it. And you don't have as much of that with Paramount. So they're in pretty good shape. They've had some, Top Gun Maverick, I don't got to tell you, that was a huge hit. They've got some of that. They've still got a little bit of juice, but obviously not as much as maybe they need to kind of counterbalance that $13 billion in debt. And they even saw a little bit of streaming growth, but it's an indication of the world that we live in, that you can grow your streaming service and still lose money. So that's basically where they're at. It's like their streaming service is doing good because they didn't lose as much money as they did before. So it's one of those things where like they were in such fucked up shape, and streaming in general is so fucked up that like if you staunch the bleeding just a little bit, they're looking at that like a win. It's not exactly a win. It's not exactly a profitable venture overall for Paramount, but it does look like the complete prolapse is slowing down a little bit. They might be able to suck that back in at some point eventually. So, you know, Paramount, honestly, they're looking to me a lot like a 90-pound white girl sitting on a couch surrounded by 5 giant linebacker-looking motherfuckers right about now is how they are looking to me. I mean, unless they can make some moves to strengthen themselves, and that's really where the Warner Brothers acquisition comes in. I think Paramount is really, they're kind of doing a similar assessment to me, and they're looking in the mirror and saying, we need this. We've got an existential crisis coming up in a couple of years if we can't get like a real good infusion of some Warner Brothers shit. I need that Warner Brothers shit, dog, you know what I'm saying? I gotta have it. That brings me to Warner Brothers, the man of the hour. Warner Brothers is the major that really kicked off this whole train of thought and research for me over the past several days. Warner Brothers was, again, they were a powerhouse making bank from some of the very earliest days of cinema. I mean, you know, the decade of the 1930s when the talkies were huge and we started dibbling and dabbling in color. And I mean, they were churning out big stuff, but they were churning out hits as well. I mean, I think they've got Gone with the Wind, but they've also got, you know, they've got James Cagney stuff. They've got, I think Roaring Twenties is one of theirs. That's one that Criterion put out that I can't praise highly enough. So they've got some really great stuff that goes way, way back that I would hate to lose, but obviously Warner Brothers and their library and their IP is what's hanging in the balance. You know, having read up on the 5 majors and how they're doing now, after about 100 years of existence, I'm actually kind of surprised that Warner Brothers isn't buying Paramount, honestly, because it almost seems like Paramount's in a kind of a similarly shaky condition as Warner Brothers. Maybe not as bad, maybe not as much debt as Warner Brothers has, but at the same time, Warner Brothers has, I mean, I think objectively far better IP than what Paramount has. I mean, even with Top Gun Maverick and Mission Impossible, and so they've got the Tom Cruise thing going on. I mean, imagine if they had Harry Potter too. If you got Tom Cruise and Harry Potter, you ain't never gonna lose, motherfucker. You ain't never gonna lose. So, I mean, as I've alluded to, I think Warner Brothers' true strength lies in its intellectual property. I think them having Batman and the DC universe and Harry Potter, those are very, very lucrative. They've been lucrative over years, decades. I mean, even Harry Potter feels newer, but those movies have been coming out for decades now, and Harry Potter has really had some staying power as far as like a lucrative IP goes. Warner Brothers, you know, they've obviously made tons of money off Batman and Superman and the DC heroes, maybe not as much the last couple of years, but it is what it is. Again, Warner Brothers has some wild debt as well, I think even more than Paramount. And I think the utter prolapse of the superhero genre has not helped Warner Brothers in particular because their DC IP is like such a cornerstone of what they hold. And so the minute superhero films don't make $1 billion each and they're not making their money back as much, then it's not looking as good for Warner Brothers as it was maybe 10 years ago when the superhero genre was still popping off really strong and people were very excited about more Henry Cavill's Superman and shit like that. Ben Affleck's Batman and stuff like that. I mean, people were excited about this stuff. Not as much these days. So that shit having cooled might be what's also putting Warner Brothers in not as strong of a position. They're not bringing in as much revenue nowadays as maybe they did 10 years ago off of this shit. So that might have let some of the wind out of their sails. That being said, you know, a century later, I am just really sorry to see the state of the 5 major golden era Hollywood studios. I mean, these were studios that were legendary. I mean, I'm I'm no old timer, but I mean, even going back to my childhood, it's like these were the big names. Whenever you were watching a movie, you'd pop in something that was a big deal, or you go into the theaters to see something that you've been looking forward to for years, and seeing the 20th Century Fox logo or hearing the MGM Lion. I mean, that was big shit, and hearing that stupid little like dun dun when you start up Netflix is not on the same level at all. That little dun dun while the end just paints itself across your screen and you wait for your stupid internet to load so it doesn't buffer so bad, it has nothing on sitting there in the theaters. The lights go down, the trailers are over, and then boom, you hear that 007 music. You see that lion come up and growl and it fades, and then you're in for the next 90 minutes of James Bond just laying dick, like snapping necks and cashing checks, you know what I'm saying? And it means something different. And that's what I want to talk about in the final part of my video. But we do have some major studios these days. Obviously, they're not the same as the major five from 90 years ago, but we still have some major studios. Disney is probably the first one that's going to come up. I mean, Disney was not a major studio in the 1930s. They were relatively small at the time that they released Snow White in 1937. And they had some flops after that. I mean, we think of things those early Disney years of the 40s as being like, wow, like classic after classic, Pinocchio, Bambi, Dumbo, shit we talk about 60, 70, 80 years later, we're still talking about, but it was not that way. But of course, nowadays, Disney probably has the single most valuable collection of IP to ever exist. I mean, it definitely rivals and possibly one-ups Warner Brothers in terms of IP, because we're talking about shit. I mean, the Disney princesses, I mentioned Snow White, Bambi, Pinocchio, Dumbo. Everybody's heard of them. Everybody's heard of Pixar. Everybody's seen Toy Story. So they've got old IP, they've got new IP, they got Winnie the Pooh, they got Marvel, they got Star Wars. I mean, they've spent a lot of money over the last 20 or so years just buying up everything they can get their grubby little hands on. And honestly, somebody needs to fucking sue their ass for monopoly as well, and just driving all that shit into the ground. But Disney has, of course, diversified revenue streams. It's not just their film or television, their media entertainment. Of course, that's a huge part of it, but they've also got the parks. Disney's got parks throughout the world. They raise a lot of money from park attendance. Even when it's down, I think it's a major support for them to keep revenue coming in. And so they're able to kind of buttress some of their losses with Disney Plus. I mean, they can keep Disney Plus going at a loss for God knows how long, just because they've got all of the merchandise. When's the last time you walked through a Walmart? How many Mickey Mouse, Minnie Mouse shit did you see on every end cap? It's everything. It's everywhere. It's unavoidable. So they make plenty of money. I'm not worried about Disney. Now, Universal Studios, they were one of the miners actually back in the 1930s, but they, like Disney, have developed theme parks for themselves. So they've got the theme park business that I think has really helped them out a lot. And they've licensed some IP for their theme parks, which is great. Like they work with Warner Brothers for the Harry Potter IP for their theme parks. So they've done a little bit of business with Warner Brothers, and so I think they diversified well enough to keep them up and to keep them running. They're also part of a huge conglomerate, the NBC Universal, Comcast, NBC Universal. It disgusts me when they start taking these huge companies and like just mushing them all together to make an even huger company. I hate seeing them aggregate this much, but Comcast, NBC, Universal, so they're making plenty of money selling you, I don't know, Xfinity internet and shit like that. They collect Universal is doing just fine because Comcast owns Xfinity, and Xfinity's charging out the ass for me to upload this stupid video to YouTube in a few minutes. Sony, of course, they're big too. They own Columbia Pictures, and that's important because Columbia Pictures goes way back again to the 1930s as well, with a lot of classic IP. They've got some classics licensed to Criterion, like His Girl Friday, a bunch of other stuff. Columbia puts out a lot. It Happened One Night, that's a Columbia film. So there's a bunch of There's a bunch of Columbia stuff going all the way back to even some silent Frank Capra stuff that I've got on my shelf over here that was released by Columbia. And so I love seeing those old Columbia releases. I'm really very fond of seeing that Columbia insignia with that broad holding up that torch and just saying, hey man, this is a good movie, even if it's an old one. You're in for a good time. Now, Sony also owns the Spider-Man movie rights from Marvel. They licensed those from Marvel way back in the day before some of you guys were even born. And they've just held on to those. And Spider-Man that's just a license to print money, apparently. And they wisely stayed out of streaming. Sony, for some reason, they had the prescience to just say, we're going to let these retards duke it out over streaming. And we'll just sit back and maybe acquire whoever's left standing in their weakened state. They were just hanging back. So they haven't lost money on streaming in the way a lot of other studios have, or studio, conglomerates. NBC, of course, has Peacock, so Universal's connected to Peacock, and Sony doesn't have those same connections, so they're not losing any money in the great prolapse of streaming services. And they've got a healthy investment in anime as well. Sony, being a Japanese company, they weren't afraid of no anime going way back, even before it was a sure thing here in the United States. Of course, you talk about anime nowadays, there's not a streaming service in the world that doesn't try to snap up some anime as well to get that on their streaming service. But Sony owns Crunchyroll, I believe, so that's a very healthy business for them, selling anime, Crunchyroll.com and whatnot. They sell anime and shit. So they've got a good, business in anime production, and maybe even the sales side too. They've also got the PlayStation. I mean, that's kind of a big deal. I think they still make a couple of bucks off that thing. And then there's Netflix. Netflix is definitely one of the majors these days, as much as I hate to say it. The slop kings themselves. I remember the days when Netflix actually used to produce quality content. Like it was yesterday, I remember. Ironically, it was before they had to compete with every other film and TV studio streaming service. When they were the only game in town, they actually made quality content. And it's a little ironic now that there's a whole bunch of other studios out there also making content. Netflix is just, how much slop can we churn out? How quickly can we churn it? They made the first 2 seasons of House of Cards. That was great. I mean, the other seasons sucked, but the first 2 seasons of House of Cards were very strong. They produced The Irishman. So, maybe they didn't have a lot to do with it other than funding it, but they were smart enough to write a check to Martin Scorsese and let him go wild. And then they've got some pretty premium film entertainment for their streaming service. They did the first season of Stranger Things. Every other season of Stranger Things sucked, but they have done some quality work. Now, it's few and far between. They put out thousands of hours of content every month, and it feels like very little of it, like less than 1% of it is worth a shit, but that's what it is.
What are you going to do on it?
And they actually used to release physical media too, and now it's just a tsunami of slop. I don't really have anything to add beyond what others, like my man's Chase, has already said. But I will say that it makes sense that Netflix wants Warner Brothers because, they've got Stranger Things, but besides that, Netflix, I feel like, really lacks strong, recognizable IP, like Fast and the Furious level of IP, or like Jurassic Park level of IP, or Harry Potter level IP. They don't have that. They've got more than enough cash to produce and develop strong IP, but that just seems like not something they're interested in. They want to buy something that's already established versus trying to build something up. And even when I was taking notes for this video, I was having a hard time thinking of Netflix IP. I thought of old stuff like House of Cards, Stranger Things, which has been around for almost a decade too. I actually had to Google, like, what's the Netflix IP? I had to search for it. And Wednesday, of course, they have Wednesday. How could I forget Wednesday? I haven't seen an episode of Wednesday. It doesn't. What do I look like to you? I'm a fucking middle-aged, heteronormative, cisgendered white male. Do you see me fucking doing a backflip when a new episode of Wednesday drops? I'm sorry, I'm just not part of the demographic. I'm happy for anybody who likes Wednesday. Congratulations. I got no hate in my heart, but it's not for me, right? They've been pushing the shit out of Millie Bobby Brown's mediocre ass for a long time. And I just feel like every time you think of Netflix, it's just Millie Bobby Brown, like doing the intense, maybe she's got a hand out and her nose is bleeding. That's the Netflix aesthetic. And I have to say, I do fucking hate it. Beyond that, it's like a humongous vault of slop reality TV. That's what Netflix is. It's just 8 different languages of love at first sight and The Circle and all sort of other just slop reality content that has to be cheap as shit to produce, and they can just churn it out every single month for people to consume thoughtlessly. And do you know what? Watching that reality slop on Netflix, it just feels like waiting to die. It just feels like I'm alive right now. I will be dead in the future, hopefully in the far, far future. And I have to kill time between now and then. The time is going to pass, whether I'm productive or not. And so I'm just going to turn on some Netflix slop for the next hour, hour and a half before I go to bed. And I'm just going to watch something that's not memorable and not enriching and not particularly artistic. And I'm just waiting to die. That's what I'm doing. That's what doom scrolling and watching Netflix slop means to me. Internet content, quote, content, that's what it means to me. You're waiting to die. So I think getting Batman and Harry Potter kind of feels like something that Netflix might think they need. They need this IP that's established that everybody knows to bring more viewers in and to get more subscriptions, but it's not going to work because Batman movies aren't going to elevate Netflix's aesthetic. All that's going to happen is Netflix is going to enshitify those IP. Look it up, enshitify, it's a word, I promise. So what does any of this mean? I've got no fucking clue. I'm not even going to remember this conversation in the morning. I think what it means is that no corporate entity can last forever, no matter how great. All 5 golden era majors are at best dim echoes of their former glory, or their crumbled Ozymandias statues at worst. Go read Ozymandias by Percy Bysshe Shelley. If you didn't get that reference, by the way, it will only take you about 3 minutes to read. It's 14 lines. You can do it. It's a very short poem, but it's very relevant to the discussion here. So go and culture yourself a little bit, you swine. All greatness is ephemeral. As the Buddha taught, all things are impermanent. Nothing lasts forever. Shit the atoms we're all made of aren't even going to last forever. That shit will eventually pull itself apart in 1 trillion years. So whomever winds up with Warner Brothers will certainly acquire a trove of priceless IP, but with it, a legacy of decline as much as greatness. I mean, there's nothing to say that Netflix won't kill the golden goose with slop and wind up over-leveraged with debt as Disney Plus and Amazon Prime continue to come after them, try to eat their lunch. I can imagine buying Warner Brothers and taking on all that debt is as much a liability as it is an asset. I think in the long run, and I think this might be the very long run, like I think it might be years before I can say I was right about this, I think Netflix's aversion to theatrical and home media releases might actually be their undoing, despite it kind of being their thing. It's their product. I think it's going to eventually unspool and undo them. I mean, eroding the value of cinema as an art by pushing people to watch Lawrence of Arabia on a smart device shorter than my dick just makes the whole experience small. It's not just the screen that's small. It's like you make the whole thing small. It trivializes the art of film. Netflix trivializes the art of film to serve the technology of streaming. And in time, I think people will come to value what Netflix is offering less and less. Netflix is too focused on algorithms and analytics, shit like time spent on the app and revenue, but they don't have the wisdom to realize that this shit is supposed to be big. The movies are supposed to be big. Words like big and grand and monumental are the words that you use when you attempt to describe something that's important. You don't say small and portable and you could project the whole film on my wife's ass with room to spare when you're talking about something important. Hey, everybody, look at your Apple Watch because Oppenheimer 2 Nuclear Boogaloo just dropped. Watch it on your Apple Watch. When the image size is 2 square inches, I guess VHS does start looking like 4K at that point. I mean, I just don't want to hear about how home technology rivals the theater experience coming from broke dick chumps who bought a $300 Hisense TV from Walmart on Black Friday in 2021. Even a 100-inch TV is nothing next to a movie theater screen that is 45 to 50 feet wide on average. So I'm not buying any argument that consumer tech rivals theatrical tech. I mean, unless you build an airplane hangar in your backyard and put a theater in that bitch, you're not ever going to be able to compare to the scale. So I think the question is a matter of scale for Netflix and how them churning out slop and insisting that the small screen is just as good. I think, yeah, they're a tech company masquerading as an entertainment company. They understand the tech, they understand the algorithms, they don't understand the entertainment part. And I think that will eventually be their undoing, because even once they've got the technology perfected, the reason people are going to Netflix is to be entertained, to watch movies and watch TV. And I think that people will, even if it's only subconscious, they will notice on some level that the entertainment that they're being offered by Netflix is just eventually not going to be worth what Netflix is asking for as far as the price goes. And so people will subscribe to Netflix for 1 or 2 months every year. They'll catch up on the shit, the new season of whatever, and then they'll unsubscribe again. And I think ultimately that's kind of the problem with streaming as a value proposition. When streaming was essentially a replacement for Blockbuster, where I don't have to leave my house and I have access to a library of film and television that's comparable to walking through a Hollywood Video or a Blockbuster Video rental store on a Saturday evening. Sure, for $10 a month, that's worth it. But for $20 a month, and I still got to look at ads, and I only get to watch the slop that Netflix put out because everybody else has took their ball and went home. I think, you know, it's a different world, and Netflix is going to try to compete by buying Warner Brothers IP. And if it works, yeah, it's not going to be so good for us buying Warner Brothers media in the future. We'll have to fight over basically what gets released before 2027 or so. But with any luck, maybe Paramount will win out, and they'll redouble their commitment to physical media, and we'll see more beautiful 4K releases from Warner Archive like The Searchers. That's at least what I'm hoping for. In the meantime, I am going to drink the rest of this. I'm going to thank these motherfuckers here for being real ones. The rest of you, thanks for clicking on this video. Peace, I'm out.